It's a normal night at Belle Reve Prison, located in balmy Louisiana. A handful of superhuman criminals are being admitted, escorted by half a dozen highly trained, well-equipped guards. The prisoners all wear chains around their wrists and ankles, but they seem well-behaved enough. The guards are paying attention, but honestly, they're used to this kind of routine. No one is really focused, they're just there. The only place the guards seem tense at all, and I'm talking ready for action at a moment's notice tense, is just outside of the cell for Black Manta. Inside of it stands Amanda Waller, a fit black woman with short hair. She's dressed in a purple suit and holds a tablet in her hands. A psychopath is someone incapable of feeling emotions like love, compassion, or remorse, she says to Black Manta. And you try hard to put that kind of energy out, but you're too focused, too controlled. What you really are is the most highly disciplined killing machine that's ever occupied one of her cells. Which makes him the perfect candidate for Task Force X. Manta isn't interested in her pitch. You mean the Suicide Squad? Everyone knows that deal is a lie. You do a mission, you don't go free. You get to do another mission. Well then what can I offer you? Waller asks. What does Black Manta want? Sitting on his bed with no cuffs on at all, which I am utterly surprised by given the last time we saw him, Black Manta drowned a prison guard in a toilet. He answers, "The only thing I want is to kill Aquaman." Waller nods and starts typing on her tablet. Right. Says in your record you blame him for your dad's death? My father's murder, he corrects. According to the files put together by Argus, which is the government agency that is responsible for superhumans in the DC universe, Manta was hired to get a sample of Arthur Curry's blood, back before he was known as Aquaman. Curry's father defended him, had a heart attack, died, and then came after you in revenge. In the darkness, he killed your father, thinking it was you. Waller now spins the tablet around, showing a photograph of Black Manta in his gear. So you do all of this to kill one man? The Manta persona, the gear, the training you've gone through, you went from a treasure hunter to an Aquaman hunter. And for what? Let's say you do kill Aquaman. What happens then? Where do you direct all of that hate? I can help you, Waller pitches. And an explosion suddenly rocks the prison from outside. Waller and Manta don't know it, but two members of the crime syndicate, Power Ring and Deathstorm, have just blown the prison wide open. Waller recovers from this quickly and exits the cell, demanding answers. The scared guards report that communications are out, including their cell phones. What should they do? Waller dusts off her suit. Grow a pair and do your jobs. Keep to your posts and keep these doors closed. As she passes by two more guards, she gives them new orders. They are to take Manta to the squad's holding cell. Whoever did this, they aren't going to survive the night. The guards open the cell and gesture for Manta, who has remained seated on his bed this entire time, to move. But massive hands grab them by the heads and then pull them off panel. We hear flesh tearing. We hear screams. We see blood and clothing flying from the hallway. A large form then films the door. It's a half-man, half-shark. Hammerhead shark, to be precise. Blood is littered all around his mouth. You're Black Manta? Cool. I'm King Shark, he says. He walks up and holds out a hand, offering something to Manta. The guys who broke the jail are throwing a party, and you definitely rate an invite. But King Shark drops a coin into Manta's palm. It looks to be made of pure silver and has a side profile of a monstrous-looking face on it. Along the edges of the coin is the Latin phrase, Aeternus Malum. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.20 of Aquaman, Changing Tides. Welcome to Villains Month. As mentioned last episode, Villains Month stems from two publishing concerns on DC's end. The first is DC's annual attempt to drum up interest in their comics since the beginning of the New 52. The New 52 is officially 2 years old at this point, and in the same manner as the Zero issues on the first anniversary, Villains Month is meant to draw public attention and get the geeks talking. It also works similarly to the Zero issue in that these issues take the place of a regularly scheduled issue. So instead of getting an Aquaman issue in November of 2013, we got these two issues instead, Aquaman issues 23.1 and 23.2. The second motivator for these comics being released is the just launched Forever Evil crossover event. If you're wondering why I am not covering all of Forever Evil as part of this event, like I did the Throne of Atlantis crossover, it's because this series is focused on being a breakdown of Aquaman. And Aquaman is pretty much absent from this event. Even his evil Earth 3 counterpart, who is a member of the crime syndicate, the Sea King, doesn't get to appear all that much. He's murdered pretty much as soon as he appears, so we don't even really get to see evil Aquaman in an Aquaman comic. Which is lame because that could have been really fun. Anyways, DC did a number of interesting moves with these issues. First off, I really love the branding. Each Villains Month cover has the villain's name covering the lead character's title font, and the villain is also framed at the center of the image. This is done to indicate the replacement of the hero, and it works. It is also a nice echo back to the Zero issue cover theme, which saw the star of each title bursting from the cover, but here they've been replaced by a bad guy. That's really cool. Secondly, there are two versions of each cover, your standard normal cover and a 3D version. The 3D version cost $1 more at time of publication, so I did opt to get the standard covers. I know, it's lame, but still, this is still a neat feature. It helps the cover stand out on a new comics shelf, and it does catch the eye immediately. And I certainly do love a good gimmick cover. When I'm strolling through the back issue bins, just, seeing what stands out to me, seeing what catches my eye, nothing makes me stop and look at a cover more than there being a gimmick for it. 3D effects, chromium, clear, die cut, glow in the dark, I don't care, just try and sell it to me, baby. Most of the time, I'm willing to pay out for that. I did not get the 3D covers when this issue came out simply because I was buying so many comics, and I'm not a huge Aquaman fan, normally speaking, and I just didn't want to pay extra. These covers do seem to go between $5 to $6 in terms of back issue price, so they're not super expensive, and maybe someday I'll go back and fill them in with this collection, but I really don't think that's going to happen. As far as tying into the Forever Evil story, we'll see how well the authors do telling us what we need to know as part of the event to understand these stories, and what we need to know to just enjoy the comics. This issue does have two writers, by the way. It was plotted by regular author Geoff Johns, but it was scripted by Tony Bedard. It was drawn by Claude St. Aubin. Yes, when I say drawn, I do mean drawn. He did the pencils and the inks for it, with colors by an artist named Blond. Up to this point in the story, it's all been recapped so far. Waller was basically an author stand-in, informing us of Black Manta's background, motivation, and current status quo. For longtime readers like myself, and hopefully y'all out there, it's a little bit annoying to spend the time doing this, because we know this information. But new readers who are maybe trying this book out because of the event, that isn't very well advertised, could certainly use that information. It also only takes up 3 pages of the comic, so at least as far as it being a recap, it's fast-paced. More importantly, this scene poses a great question. Who is Black Manta if Aquaman is removed completely from his life? I have kind of spoiled the reveal that Aquaman is considered dead thanks to the actions of the crime syndicate, rather than letting that play out as a natural part of Manta's story. It's my bad, y'all. So it is about to become a very real concern for Manta. What will he do? What does his life look like when the one thing you've built your life around goes away? That's a great question, and it allows us to explore a really interesting unseen side of Black Manta so far. The coin that he was given is something that we've seen floating around the DC universe for a little bit of time now. The Syndicate has had an agent on Earth for some time now, preparing for them, and he has been reaching out to skilled, talented supervillains in order to recruit them as allies for the Syndicate. Remember way back at the end of the Throne of Atlantis crossover, how there was a mysterious third party looking to recruit bad guys? That is the beginning of Forever Evil's main story elements. This character would give a prospective recruit one of these coins from Earth 3. They also double as communication devices. According to what I've read online, the Latin phrase that is on it is incorrect. It should actually be aeternum malum, not aeternus. A small mistake, but one that I did not notice at all, being totally unfamiliar with Latin. I was trying to figure out who the face on that coin was, and I came across the Latin fact instead. I never did learn who was on the coin, by the way. When I searched for a three-eyed bad guy DC, the main thing that I got was a villain called Despero, who doesn't appear to be connected to the Syndicate at all. He is a bad guy, and he has appeared in DC's New 52 up to this point, but he doesn't really seem particularly tied to the crime syndicate. I suppose that it could be Trigon, who is a demon with at least 3 eyes, but I feel like he's typically got like 4. I honestly don't know. I'm not familiar enough with DC to know, and, you know, spending 15 minutes on a Google search didn't give me the result I needed, which means it's impossible to find. If you know, please share with the rest of the class. I would love to know. King Shark being the one who gives Black Manta the coin is neat, as he is very clearly a water-ocean-inspired character. He's a shark man. You don't get a character more appropriate than that for an Aquaman comic, right? You wouldn't think. It's kind of a shame, in my opinion, that he hasn't appeared in Aquaman at all up to this point. He has largely been a cast member over in the Suicide Squad comic instead, and Waller has been clearly trying to get Black Manta over in that title, so there are all kinds of like neat thematic story tie-ins going on between these two characters. I loved King Shark as part of the Secret Six. As King Shark leaves Black Manta's cell, he quietly asks if he could get an autograph later, which is adorable. I do not like the hammerhead design for this particular version of King Shark, but I am glad that he's still like a little bit of a doof. That's awesome. Black Manta leaves his cell, but he doesn't begin to participate in all the chaos going on around him. Escaped criminals are fighting the guards, they're killing some of them, destroying property, and just, you know, making chaos, being bad guys. Manta just walks, his head down, his eyes on that coin. A broadcast comes from the coin, originating from the Syndicate. To all the chosen, this is their sole opportunity to answer this call. We have given you your freedom, and more. This world belongs to you now. Come to these coordinates and claim it. One of the guards sees Manta, and knows that he's a powerless human. Manta is just a dude, and that means this guard thinks that he can handle him. He orders Manta to return to his cell, or he'll shoot him. Manta spins, brushing this coin across the guard's throat, slicing it open. He then moves on, going to the personal effects locker. Inside of it, he finds Orm, retrieving his helmet and scepter. The pair don't say anything. They don't fight. They barely acknowledge the other's existence. Orm takes his stuff and leaves. Black Manta picks up his helmet. This is a super cute moment. From an audience perspective, this feels like it should be something, right? These are Aquaman's 2 biggest bad guys up to this point, meeting for the first time. But Orm has no idea who Black Manta is, which was demonstrated back in issue 13. Aquaman asked, "Hey, did you hire Black Manta?" And Orm said, "Who? What? What is a Black Manta?" So he doesn't even know this guy. And Black Manta has no grudge against Orm because Orm didn't kill his father. Like 2 ships passing in the night, they just move on. And I think that's really neat. I also dig Manta's professionalism, I guess would be the word for it, when he leaves his cell. Johns and Bedard are showing us that Black Manta isn't an insane criminal. He doesn't hurt people because he likes to hurt people, or because he thinks it's fun, or in order to blow off steam. His quest, his one goal in life, is to kill Aquaman. And yes, he will kill anyone who stands in the way of him accomplishing that. But he's not just going to kill anyone for any reason. The only person that he kills here is the one guard who attacked him first, so you could maybe argue that there's some degree of self-defense going on here. Black Manta might not be a good person, but he does have standards, damn it. Outside, we see a helicopter in the air, surveying the situation. The pilots are glad to be up there. They're waiting to pick up Waller. A tow cable then sinks into the side of the chopper, and a fully costumed Black Manta is pulled up to it. Manta pulls the guy out of the passenger seat and drops him. I mean, I never said that Black Manta was a good person. I said that he's got standards. We then move to Happy Harbor, Rhode Island, which is notable for being the original site of the Justice League's headquarters way back when they first debuted. In the New 52's continuity, though, this is where the League's watchtower fell when it was attacked as part of the Syndicate's plan for invasion. In the wreckage of the watchtower, dozens of villains have gathered. They're all bristling with excitement. If somebody brought down the watchtower, one of them says, then they deserve a medal. Manta doesn't say or do anything. He's just surveying the scene, taking all of this in. Until Aquaman's trident is suddenly dropped to the ground. Manta scoops it up immediately, declaring it his. As he does, we can hear others muttering about Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, Superman's cape. This is physical hard proof of the Syndicate's claims. They appear from the ruins of the Watchtower. Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, Power Ring, Deathstorm, Johnny Quick, and Atomica, declaring that the world is now theirs. They have killed the Justice League. Ultraman, the dark version of Superman, speaks for the group, starting by explaining who they are, but Manta isn't really listening to any of this. He holds up Aquaman's trident, thinking about what this actually means. Behind him, the Scavenger looks at him gleefully. "You hear that? Aquaman's dead!" The big red eyes turn. They stare at Scavenger for a moment, unnerving the man, and then Manta walks away. Another villain points out that Ultraman looks just like Superman, but with a U on his chest, people. Like, this is some kind of trick, obviously. Heat vision burns that guy to ash in an eye blink. Ultraman is not Superman. "If you pledge your allegiance to us, this can be your world," Ultraman says. "You are our allies, our secret society, our army." Manta walks to the nearest shoreline, and he tosses the Syndicate's coin into the ocean. We move to Gloucester, Massachusetts, where the city is burning. Manta has no interest in that, though. He goes to the graveyard and takes off his helmet. He kneels before his father's grave marker. "Father, it's over." A sonic boom interrupts his reverie. Above him, Ultraman streaks through the sky. Where Superman gets his strength from the sun and is weak to kryptonite, Ultraman is empowered by kryptonite and weakened by the sun. So he flies into space. He pushes on the moon, and then he blocks out the sun. A pallid red glow covers the earth. Lightning strikes on the horizon. Birds are shifted off course in mid-flight, and the tides shift as well. A massive wave rises off the coast, rushing toward Gloucester. Manta dives for his helmet, but he doesn't have time. He manages to scoop up the trident and sink it into the ground just before being washed over by the wave. His helmet is swept away. Grave markers crumble and shatter under the onslaught of water. The very earth beneath his feet, I guess beneath the trident, is churned up, and Manta's father's coffin breaks through to the surface. The wooden lid disintegrates easily, revealing his father's skeleton. Manta reaches out for one hand, screaming for his father as best he can underwater, but he can't reach far enough, fast enough. The body is washed away, and so is the ground that the trident was planted in. Black Manta is pulled into darkness. Above the now largely sunken town, Ultraman surveys the accidental damage. He hadn't thought about the tides. Then he shrugs. Oh well, this world is ours. And he flies away. Elsewhere, Manta finds his helmet again, thinking about Waller's words from earlier. You can be more than that, Manta, she said. You can work with me and we can redirect that hate. Because if that's the only thing driving you, what happens when you do kill Aquaman? Where do you direct all of that hate? Black Manta puts his helmet on and stares at the eclipsed sun. Then he turns to the direction that Ultraman headed in, and he starts to hunt. From here, Black Manta's story continues into the main miniseries for Forever Evil. And while I would argue that he isn't the main character of that story, I feel like that's definitely Lex Luthor, Manta is one of the few villains who chooses to fight back against the crime syndicate. This issue shows us the reasons why. Manta's sole motivation, the only reason he's a bad guy at all, is to avenge his father's death. But when the syndicate revealed that they already killed Aquaman, well, he didn't have any interest in what they were doing at all. As demonstrated in the prison, Black Manta's not a greedy maniac. He isn't a thief or a murderer who gets off on killing people. He doesn't want to rule the world. He's a man on a mission. And with no mission anymore, he's finally free. He goes to his father's grave. He says that it's done, even if it wasn't done by him. It's over. But then Ultraman floops up. Moving the moon messes with the tides. Messing with the tides scatters Manta Sr.'s bones, and Manta transfers his mission. Aquaman is dead? Great. Now the Syndicate needs to die. Or at least Ultraman. Overall, I really like this. Johns and Bedard present all of these story elements really quietly with almost nothing but visuals. We don't get to get into Manta's head with like thought bubbles or narration. He doesn't say anything about any of this. He speaks very little in the entire comic, actually. We can only watch Black Manta and interpret what he does from there. It's a really great use of the comics medium, a beautiful example of show don't tell, and I super dig that kind of thing. It is really simple though, and I won't lie, that aspect of this story kind of annoys me. Johns has demonstrated an incredibly deft hand in telling Arthur's story in the rest of the comic, presenting us with one version of the character only to truth bomb us with a totally different interpretation. That's been amazing and it's been fantastic. But Manta is kind of exactly what he appears to be, even still. And so that is vaguely unimpressive, I have to admit. Much like this issue's art, Claude St. Aubin is not a name that I'm familiar with. Looking into his history, he is largely a DC guy, although he has been working in the comic industry for over 50 years. That's really impressive. The DC thing explains why I've never noticed him before. For the most part, his style is pretty realistic, with fairly normal-sized human bodies and shapes. There's very little exaggeration going on, and there's a fair amount of shadows. All of this works, but none of it's interesting. Like, nothing pops here, nothing stands out. When I see Black Manta in my head, I am very much picturing Ivan Reis's interpretation of the character as seen in the Others story arc. And that's going to be a hard thing for any comic book artist to live up to, like, period. And even keeping that in mind and, like, kind of docking any other interpretation compared to Reis's, St. Aubin just doesn't compare. I also have a minor complaint about some small story elements because, you know, the moon does move. It is locked into a geosynchronous orbit with Earth, meaning that the moon doesn't rotate on its own axis, but it does rotate around the planet. We all get to see the moon. So while it's now blocking the sun, eventually, here's the sun, here's the Earth's going to keep moving, and the moon's going to keep moving around the Earth, and eventually the sun's just going to get exposed again. In other words, Ultraman should have to keep moving the moon ever so slightly, ever so often. And I am not a super space guy. I do not know what the math would be on that. But, like, he's going to have to keep flying up there every couple of hours and just be like, scooch, 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 which I kind of think is hilarious. It's also not nearly as cool or dramatic as this moment that we saw here, which I've got to admit was super cool and super dramatic. One of my favorite moments from Superman's Our Worlds at War crossover was when Superman just, like, pushed Pluto around the solar system like it was almost nothing. And so seeing that idea echoed here with Ultraman just manipulating the moon was a real treat for me. Superhero comics are a bit dumb at their core, and I think that the best comics know when to lean into that and when to lean away from that. Moving the moon around space casually is the kind of moment that I absolutely love. As a potential lead-in for the Forever Evil story, I think that this issue works pretty well for me. Why? Because I have gone back and forth like half a dozen times in the course of writing this episode on whether or not I wanted to cover Forever Evil as part of this streak of episodes. Even if I didn't cover the whole event, I could at least cover the main miniseries and give y'all Black Manta's journey. It has been ages since I originally read it, and that might be a fun thing to explore. But it is such a big event, and it's got nothing to do with Aquaman, and there's just so much going on in it. Between the Crime Syndicate and the Justice League and Lex Luthor and Black Manta and all the characters who battle against the Crime Syndicate, and then all the spin-offs that go on. And it's just, honestly, folks, I just don't want to cover it right now. I will be providing kind of a Black Manta, like, follow-up bit in our wrap-up episode. So if you are interested in his plotline and where it leads him, I will be giving you a basic guide. If you want to know more, you can get more, but I am not going to break that story down, at least not right now. Instead, let's see what Orm is up to. In Aquaman issue 23.2, the story opens up weeks ago. We're inside of Atlantis, where we find King Orm sitting before an audience. I would call this the throne room, except it doesn't look almost anything like the established throne room that we've seen before. It's got throne room vibes for sure, but I don't believe it's the same place. Orm sits in his purple and silver armor. A retainer stands next to him, holding out his helmet. "My king, the fleet awaits your orders," someone reports. "Good," Orm replies. "It's time the surface world learned that they cannot attack us without being repaid in kind." From the floor before him, General Rodon shouts, "The surface dwellers thought that they could threaten the likes of Orm the First, King of the Seven Seas?" But Orm doesn't rise to the bait. He does put on his helmet, saying that this isn't about him. He wears this crown for the sake of his people. Without them, he is nothing. He then looks over the assembled crowd. "A missile from the surface attacked Atlantis last night. Many were killed. There is only one response that they will give the surface world. A response of absolute force. As long as Atlantis has existed, the surface world has hated them. But today, they will learn to fear Atlantis." We then get an impressive 2-page spread of King Orm leading his army to the surface. But in the present day, Orm's lawyer is back in his cell inside of Belle Reve prison. He recaps Orm's attack and suggests that they focused their defense on Volko's role in the war. Present Orm as a head of state who was operating on bad intelligence. He didn't know Volko was behind the attack. He was just defending his people. This wasn't your fault, it was Volko's fault. This is probably the best chance that they have of avoiding the death penalty. Orm doesn't respond to him, though. He sits in his chair, staring out the window at the large, full moon. "Are you going to talk to me?" the lawyer asks. "Or am I only here to walk you to the courtroom so that they can sentence you to death?" "I have talked to you. I told you that I refuse to take part in this trial," Orm replies, still refusing to look at the man. "The judgment of the surface world means nothing to me, almost as little as the lives of you surface dwellers." From behind the lawyer, a guard excuses himself as he enters the cell. He has a bottle of water in one hand. "Sorry, he needs his water," the guard says. The lawyer's thrown by this. "Yeah, I've seen what happens to him when he goes too long without it. He might not admit it, but he gets sick." The guard hands Orm the bottle, and Orm chugs it immediately. While he does this, the lawyer looks at the guard incredulously. "I was ordered to defend a mass murderer. What's your excuse?" The guard leans on the table. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing what he's done, but I'm not the judge and neither are you. From what I've read about the war, it's a lot more complicated than good and bad. And so is he says, gesturing at Orm. The guard then leaves, his kindness done. The lawyer hums. Then he turns back to Orm. 11 more like him and maybe you've got a chance. But then the syndicate strikes. The prison shakes and the power goes out. The wall caves in, crushing the lawyer. Aw, man. Orm runs out of his cell, coughing through the dust. In the hallway, we see prisoners fighting the guards. One of them spots Orm, telling him that somebody busted the whole jail wide open. We're free men. You hear me, new fish? We're free. We aren't shown the scene of Orm and Manta crossing paths to get their stuff this time, but it does still happen. Instead, we cut to Orm standing outside, his helmet in one hand and scepter in the other. Orm watches Black Manta leave with the helicopter, his thoughts kept to himself. Quiet cries for help catch his attention. He finds the person and recognizes him. It's the guard who brought him water. The guard says that, some of the escapees messed me up. We can't really make out what damage is done to him, but he is lying in a pool of blood on the ground, and his word balloons are shaky, as if he is struggling to talk. Orm kneels next to him. The guard notices that, "You got your gear?" Orm explains that somebody opened the vault. He figures that someone wants them to escape. Holding his stomach, the guard asks for Orm's help. Orm just asks instead, which direction is the ocean? Tears in his eyes, the guard says that it's 10 miles south. Just, please, help me before you go. Of course, Orm replies. I wouldn't leave someone like you to suffer. He reaches out a hand and closes it over the guard's mouth and nose. His eyes go wide. He struggles against the vice-like grip. Remember, Orm has superhuman strength. Be brave, he says confidently. This will soon pass. Thank you for your kindness. I am pleased I can return it. The guard stops moving. Orm lets the body roll over, foam and blood coming from his mouth. And Orm begins to walk to the south. Oh, that's rough. I won't lie, I expected more cold-blooded murder in general from the Black Manta issue, not this one. When Orm attacked the surface world, Johns pretty firmly established that he was doing it in order to defend his nation, not because he enjoys killing people. We're even reminded of this by the guard earlier, so seeing Orm kill that guard was really downright chilling. Like, I know that Johns had the scene during the Thrones crossover with Orm ruminating about how to suffocate a human. You know, they breathe through their nose. That's weird. But I didn't consider that that thought stuck with him. It's an interesting throwback to the event, maybe demonstrating that while Orm's motivations for the attack were noble, that there is a darker streak to his nature. Like, he is curious about what it takes to kill a human being, right? There's a fascination there for him. There is a darker aspect to who he is than just, I'm a king defending my people. Well, maybe you're also a little bit of maybe a murderous psychopath. Maybe he just doesn't see human life as valuable. He does certainly say, I would never allow someone like you to suffer. And I think he means a human, not necessarily somebody who helped him or a guard or anything along those lines. It would be interesting to see if Orm was put into a similar situation with an Atlantean. Would he just kill the Atlantean or try to help him in the same way where with this human, he just decided, I'm just going to kill you because that's easiest. Orm is certainly more complicated than good or bad, but he's also not just good either. Anyways, once again, Johns and Bedard team up to get this issue out on time. The beginning of the book is a recap, again, establishing who Orm is, why he is a bad guy, and then it moves us forward into the rest of his narrative for the issue. We don't really see anything new in all of this information, and it definitely takes us longer than Manta's story did, which is a bit annoying. But at least we did get a really dope 2-page spread of Orm leading his army out of it. That looked fantastic. I'll take 2-page spreads of Orm and his army all day. There is, I have to admit, a slightly newer added element in that bit of story. Just a little bit of hope. The guard being kind to Orm and the lawyer appreciating that kindness is meant to give us some hope for Orm's future. That maybe Arthur is right. That maybe the surface world isn't that bad, and that maybe Arthur's brother won't be killed. It's the first time that we have seen this particular lawyer express any form of hope or belief in Orm since the first time he appeared, so it does stand out even more. And then he's killed. It feels even more tragic to have that loss. He was finally coming around, and now he's dead. The same bit of storytelling happens with the guard. If that was just any guard, like if we didn't get the guard scene earlier and Orm was just walking by a guard and he was like, "Hey, yo, help me, man," I don't think Orm would have cared, and I don't think we would have cared. But this guy saw Orm's need for water and helped him out. Orm didn't ask it, he didn't demand it. This guy went, "God, this guy doesn't look very good. Let me get him a bottle of water." And he's continued to do it, apparently. This dude had mercy for Orm. And in his own twisted Atlantean way, Orm had mercy for him, too. Just not in the way that the guard expected. And it is a chilling scene, absolutely, but it's also a tremendously disappointing scene. I really came to like Orm during the Throne crossover, and I would like to see him adopt a stance closer to his brothers, one of trying to bridge the surface and water worlds. 2 brothers fighting side by side to make the world a better place? That would be so cool! Seeing Orm choose to kill this guy instead of help him absolutely breaks my heart, because it puts Orm further on the path of being a bad person and not just a foolish leader. And I also have to say that choosing not to participate in the surface world's legal system doesn't mean that that legal system won't kill you, Orm. You might be too proud to try and save yourself, but that don't mean crap in the courtroom. They'll kill you. This scene also secretly quietly tells us whether Merc, Tula, and SWAT went through with their rescue mission, because clearly they did not. This means that they must have gone back to Atlantis to help fight. What became of them, we don't know yet, but I am glad that they chose to help out back home. Oh, this was something that I forgot to mention back up top with the Black Manta issue, but the Black Manta issue also confirms whether the Scavenger lived or died at the end of our last issue. He is clearly alive. We see him, he's up and about, he's talking to Black Manta, and he is oddly excited to see the news of Aquaman being dead. The Scavenger's motivation so far from what we've seen in the comic doesn't really seem to be killing Aquaman. It really felt more like torturing him. Maybe. So his excited giddiness over Aquaman being dead feels a little bit out of character from what we've seen so far, but it is also, that little bit of storytelling is really meant to highlight how villainous the rabble around Manta is, as opposed to how villainous he is. This guy's just like, Aquaman's dead! Woo! This is great! And Black Manta's standing there going, Aquaman's dead, I have nothing to live for. And so I do think, while Scavenger's presentation feels uneven to me, it does do the job for what it was trying to do in the moment. Back in this issue, we then get a full page of Orm just walking down the road, passing by a sign that says LA 22, or Louisiana State Road 22. Walking, Orm complains. How tedious. And this is the kind of detail storytelling that I really appreciate about these kinds of issues. As an Atlantean who would have grown up underwater, Orm is probably very unfamiliar with walking for any long period of time. He swims everywhere. So this doubly sucks for him. Not only is he stuck on the polluted, corrupt surface world, but now he's got to walk through it? Oh, could this day get any worse? Not too far away, we stop by Hank's. I thought upon my initial reading that Hank's was a grocery store, but I guess it could be a diner, maybe a roadside gas station. The artwork is a little bit vague, in my opinion. There is a man and a woman on the inside complaining that they have no power, no internet, and no phone signal. So why is the TV the only thing still working? The woman doesn't really know, and she kinda doesn't care. She's much more concerned with getting home to her son, Tommy, and that's the main thing that matters to her. The man, however, stares at the TV. All it's showing is that "damn, the world is ours" message. What the hell is that supposed to even mean? A pair of criminals burst through the door. "It means anything we want goes." One of them, really big dude, picks up the man and smashes him against the wall. The woman screams, "Hank!" Oh, look at that. His name was Hank. I figured that was just the name of the store. Sorry, Hank. Anyways, seeing the woman, the criminals now turn their attention to her. "Hey, what's the special today?" one of them asks, opening and closing his hand in a squeezing motion. "Humans?" Orm asks from the door. "The sun has been blocked by the moon. The stars have gone black. Which way to the water?" The big guy glares at Orm. "Your timing sucks, new fish." "Yeah," the smaller guy agrees. "Ask for directions somewhere else." Orm hefts his scepter, feeling its weight. "New fish," he growls. "You will not address me as that again, surface dweller." The pair of criminals rush him, one of them armed with super strength and the other with sharp claws. The big guy punches Orm across the face, and he's still standing. It does almost nothing. He wipes the small trickle of blood from his mouth, and then he punches the big guy through the ceiling. His body flies away from the building in a mist of blood. The smaller guy, Orm just stabs with his scepter, ignoring his pleas for mercy. Orm swings the blade, cleaning the blood off of it. He then looks at the woman. "Which way to the water?" She hesitates for a second, but she does say that it's a mile or so down the road. "Please don't kill me," she says quietly. "I have a little boy." But Orm doesn't move towards her at all. He actually just pulls off his prison orange and begins to pull on his armor. What are you doing?" the woman asks. Orm finishes putting on his royal uniform. "I'm preparing to leave this dirty world and take back the throne that is rightfully mine," he answers. "I can smell the poisons in your air. You've tainted the very ground with toxins. You kill the very environment that sustains you, and worse, you kill each other. There is no murder in Atlantis. There is no political divide. I would not allow it. I would never let my kingdom fall into such a sorry state as this." Orm walks out the door. Maybe now no one else will be stupid enough to attack the king of Atlantis. But as he goes, the woman follows. "Wait, please! My son, Tommy, he's at the babysitter's place. And if the prison has broken open and the criminals have made it there, they've probably already got to the babysitter's and killed her. My son is your problem," Orm says coldly. "My only concern is getting back to the water." "Please!" she shouts. "Tommy is only 8. "Then he should know how to defend himself," Orm says, turning to glare at her. "I had to do the same when I was that age. It's what I was forced to do to prepare for the responsibilities that I have." He turns away, and lightning strikes, emphasizing his decision, his monstrousness. As the rain starts to fall, and the pair continue their walk, the woman eventually peels off. Orm closes his eyes, enjoying the feel of water falling on his face. For a moment, he just enjoys the fact that he is almost home. The woman sees the babysitter's house. 2 more men have the babysitter and Tommy in their arms. They're terrified, but they are still alive for now. She turns to Orm, begging him to help. "Why would you even save me if you don't care about anything but yourself?" she asks. "What kind of man are you?" Orm walks towards the nearby ocean. "I'm not a man. I'm Atlantean." The mom rushes at the criminals. She has to try. One of them smiles at her approach. "Come on, lady, the more the merrier." As his feet cross the beach, Orm's enhanced hearing allows him to hear Tommy's scream for his mother. As he steps into the water, Orm can hear her being shoved to the ground. He stops for a moment. "Somebody, please, help!" And then Orm dives into the water. And he rises back up. 8. 8 is too young. The King of Atlantis turns back towards land, and the issue ends with a quote by Edwin Lewis Cole. "You don't drown by falling in the water. You drown by staying there." Redemption! Orm has found redemption! Okay. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration, because, I mean, Orm totally killed 3 people in this issue. He is by no means a saint, he is by no means a hero, but this ending does bode well for him, at least in my mind. Remember back in Aquaman issue 18 when Arthur asked Merc to put himself in the shoes of a child in Boston during the Atlantean attack? And Merc walked away with the lesson that humans will only ever fear and hate Atlanteans, that humans view them as monsters? Well, here we literally have Orm putting himself in the state of Tommy, and he decided to help the kid. He learned the lesson. That's great. That shows that Orm isn't a lost soul. He isn't a maniac. He is a head of state who acted on bad intelligence, and he has just been allowing himself to wallow in it. Everyone has told him that he's bad and treated him like he's bad, and so he has been going bad. As he's been in prison, his prejudice against surface dwellers has just been increasing and increasing and increasing. He even tells the lawyer, "I have as little respect for your trial as I have for you surface dwellers," which is to say he doesn't respect them at all. But here, with this moment, he finally chooses to do something good for a surface dweller. He does something selfless. He helps with no thought of reward or personal benefit. Those are the actions of a good person. Now, to be fair, the general vibe that we have seen of Atlantis seems to be one largely of hardness. They respect strength, and misused, strength can become abusive and wrong. Keep in mind that Orm did tell the woman that in Atlantis there is no political divide because he would not allow there to be one. Orm's reign might be a mostly celebrated one so far, but there's somebody suffering somewhere under his oppressive thumb, someone who disagrees that he won't let do that. That's just how monarchical dictatorships work. I also love the insight that this moment of heroism gives us into Orm's background, because we haven't really seen a lot of facts about Orm's background yet. Volko told Arthur, and through Arthur us, that Orm potentially orchestrated the deaths of his parents in order to seize the throne when he was a child. But reading this issue, that doesn't seem to be the case. Orm is defensive of his rough childhood, raised by the former head of the Royal Guard. He says, "I had to do worse when I was 8, because he had to. That's what was expected of him. That's just how it was in Atlantis when he was 8. But when faced with abandoning this child to a terrible fate, Orm won't do it. 8 is too young." And sure, Orm means Tommy in the moment, but I think that he also means himself. He didn't want to have to survive what he did. He didn't want to have to learn to handle the responsibilities that he did end up having to do. Orm sees that he can spare Tommy that pain, and so he does. The other thing that I want to note, because I think it's really important for Orm's character, is that he says he's going to take back the throne that is rightfully his. He gave Arthur the throne after his defeat in the crossover. It was right and proper, according to Atlantean law. And even in their fighting, Orm said, "I didn't want the throne. The only reason I took it is because you left it, Arthur. I had no choice in the matter." But maybe, apparently, during his stay on the surface, Orm has changed his mind. He now thinks that the throne should be his, and he planned at the very least, to go get it back. Orm might have grown as a person in some ways, and he might have slid backwards in others. There's also a cool background element that I want to point out. When Orm interrupts the criminals at Hank's diner, he does point out that the moon has been moved and the stars are missing. These are elements of Fear Itself's story, which we saw in Black Manta when Ultraman pushed the moon to block out the sun. This tells us that Orm has been navigating his way back to the ocean using the stars. With them moved, he can't tell which way is which, and that's a cool detail. It does harken back to this idea that sailors, who were humans associated with the water in our existence and kind of storytelling mythology, use the stars to navigate. And it's kind of a cool way to connect the surface world and Atlanteans. I don't really know how much the Atlanteans would really use the sun, moon, and stars, given that, you know, they live underwater, and you go far enough down underwater and you aren't seeing the sun and moon and stars. Like, it's just dark down there. So this is an element that on the one hand I think is really cool, but I also don't really know if it would apply to Atlantean society as well as they think it does. The TV thing with an unending broadcast that says, "The world is ours," is also an element of Forever Evil. Their evil cyborg counterpart, who is called the Grid, has shut down global communications and is broadcasting this message of the Syndicate's dominance. This does nothing to really further Orm's story, but it does help reflect the major impact that Forever Evil is having on the entire DC world. Artistically, this issue works a little better for me than the Black Manta one did. Geraldo Borges penciled this issue with inks by Ruy Jose. One of my favorites, Rod Reis, colored this issue as well. Borges' line work really brings to mind Ivan Reis, although his Orm does lack the boyish charm that Reis did. His more adult take on the character is much more similar to Paul Pelletier's, who's been drawing Aquaman, and I don't think that this is a bad thing. It's just different. It depends, do you want Orm to look like the younger brother of Arthur, or do you just want him to look like another adult dude? There are some moments when Orm doesn't quite look right, or where his short black hair just kind of looks like a mullet, or where things just seem off. Like, it doesn't quite seem very tight in terms of the overall penciling. For example, despite Orm's helmet being broken in half at the end of the Throne crossover by Arthur's bam punch, it is back to a single piece here. And despite Orm clearly leaving Belle Reve with it, he never wears the helmet again, nor does he appear to have it anywhere on himself. Similarly, he isn't shown carrying his armor when he leaves, but he still puts it on later in the story. Borges' work overall isn't bad, and I do feel like I like it better than what we saw in Black Manta, but it's still not quite up to snuff with the quality of artwork that we've been getting in Aquaman. Ivan Reis and Paul Pelletier are very different pencilers, but they are also masters at what they do, and these two artists, St. Aubin and Borges, just don't seem to compare, at least for me. There is a really cool coloring moment when Orm is killing the guard. The scene when they're talking is mostly blue, indicating the surrounding darkness of night for the most part. But when Orm grabs the guy's face, the panels all turn red. This could reflect the blood gathering in the guard's eyes, the murderous desire in Orm, or it could just be to heighten the drama and impact of the scene. Whatever the reason for it, it is very effective, making Orm seem that much more terrifying, and I super love that. Unlike Black Manta, Orm has no clear path forward from this issue on. In interviews given about leaving Aquaman at the time, author Geoff Johns said that he had big plans for Orm down the line over in Justice League. However, I can find no trace of Orm in the rest of the New 52's run of Justice League. Much like Black Manta, I do plan to do some research and present a vague follow-up for Orm during our Aquaman wrap-up episode, so at least take comfort, there is something, it's just probably not what Geoff Johns planned. Overall, I don't think that these two issues are bad at all. I don't think that they have nearly as much depth and quality to them as the main Aquaman ongoing series has had up to this point, but they were fun reads and they were interesting. It was nice to examine these two classic bad guys and get to know them more as their own people, especially outside the context of Aquaman and what they mean to him. These two characters feel much more like they're their own people now, and they're not just two guys that Aquaman beats up on a semi-regular basis. Could we have skipped these two issues in the grand scheme of the Aquaman ongoing series? Honestly, yeah, probably none of this affects Arthur's story and what's going on over in that book. It's quite frankly a bit of an awkward fill-in, knowing where we left off and then looking at what happens over in Forever Evil. But did we lose anything by covering these two issues? Certainly not. And I'm okay with that. Next time, the secrets of Atlantis are finally revealed. We learn the history of the dead king, the secret of Arthur Curry's real heritage, and his destiny as Aquaman. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.21 of Aquaman, The Secrets of Atlantis. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.